Exactly 3 weeks ago, Karen Thompson broke into my private property for the very first time. I was chilling in the lounge chair by my gourmet area when I distinctly heard the side gate open. As an internal affairs officer, all my senses went on high alert. Through my sunglasses, I watched her lead a group of 5 people through my meticulously kept garden, as if she were hosting a real estate tour. "And here we have the new community leisure area I got for all of us," she announced with that air of superiority I'd come to know all too well. "The outdoor cinema works perfectly even on the hottest nights, and the pool is heated all year round." I stayed perfectly still, pretending to be asleep. This space, my private $2 million retreat, had apparently been communalized without my knowledge. Interesting. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like to get access to more stories like this. My career in internal affairs taught me that patience often reveals more than immediate confrontation. Instead of cutting short Karen's little tour, I decided to study the situation. The area she was so generously offering to the other residents cost almost half as much as my house. A custom project, complete with an outdoor cinema, infinity edge pool, and an outdoor kitchen that would make any Beverly Hills chef jealous. When I finally woke up, the visitors looked embarrassed, but Karen kept her unshakable poise. "You must be the new owner. I'm Karen Thompson, president of the condo board. We were just showing you the community facilities." "Nathan Sullivan," I replied calmly. I didn't know my private property had become communal. Her smile faltered for a split second before coming back, even if more forced this time. "Oh dear, there's been a misunderstanding. These premium areas have always been shared here at the Palms. It's tradition." Tradition, a convenient word to justify property invasion. I noticed how she sized me up. Young enough not to be living in this exclusive condo without family money, she assumed. Little did Karen know that she was making a fatal mistake by underestimating someone trained to spot that kind of behavior. In the days that followed, I discreetly installed security cameras around my property. If Karen wanted to turn my space into a public amenity, I was willing to allow it, temporarily, while I collected evidence. The cameras caught everything. Karen handing out unauthorized copies of my side gate key, arranging social events without my consent, and even changing the lock when I wasn't home. What fascinated me the most was observing the social dynamics. Karen was clearly hand-picking who could use the community facilities. Younger families or those from different backgrounds were subtly discouraged or given inconvenient hours. Meanwhile, her own social circle had unlimited access. During one particularly hot afternoon, I got home earlier from work and found 6 people in my pool. Karen, lounging in my favorite deck chair, raised her champagne glass. "Nathan, what a pleasant surprise. Join us for a drink? In my own house?" "How kind of you, Karen," I replied with a controlled smile. Her friends laughed uncomfortably, but she remained unfazed. "We're all chipping in for maintenance, dear. I'll pass along the details of the monthly fee later." Things escalated when Karen sent an email to all the residents announcing a summer party in the community leisure area, my property. The invitation included an entry fee of $75 for space maintenance and requested RSVP. My name was not mentioned anywhere in the document. At the department, my colleagues couldn't believe the stories I shared over lunch. "You need to kick her out immediately," insisted Rodriguez, my partner. "This is a clear property invasion." "Not yet," I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "I want to see how far this goes." "Typical of you, Sullivan, always playing the long game." He was right. In my 7 years investigating police corruption, I learned that people end up incriminating themselves in spectacular ways when they get too comfortable. Karen was digging her own social grave, and I was just handing her the shovel. 2 days before the big party, Karen showed up at my door with a sleek folder and a determined expression. "Nathan, we need to go over some operational details about Friday's event." I invited her in, curious to hear how she would package her audacity. "I've drafted some basic rules for the communal use of the space," she explained as she opened the folder to reveal an official-looking contract. "It basically formalizes what we've already been doing. You'll have priority access, of course, with a 48-hour notice." I reviewed the 5-page document, impressed by its detail. Karen had created a complete system for scheduling, usage rules, and even a cleaning roster for a property that wasn't hers. "Looks well thought out," I commented, handing back the contract unsigned. "Curious that you didn't check the property records first." Karen waved off my comment with a gesture. "Bureaucratic details. The important thing is to maximize the community benefit of this magnificent space. Can I count on you on Friday? Some board members will be there. It'd be great for your networking." The condescending tone did not go unnoticed. To Karen, I was just a lucky young guy who needed guidance to navigate the social waters of Beverly Hills. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied with a smile she took for submissiveness, when in fact it was anticipation. Party night arrived, and I decided to let the event run as planned. I watched from a distance as Karen transformed my property into her personal social stage. Hired staff set up elegant white tents by the pool while a chef and his team prepared gourmet appetizers in my outdoor kitchen. Decorative lights were strategically hung in the trees, creating an ethereal atmosphere that, I must admit, looked straight out of a home decor magazine. By around 7 in the evening, the guests began to arrive. I immediately noticed Karen's selective pattern of welcoming. Influential condo residents received warm hugs and were ushered to the best spots, while other residents, mostly younger or new ones, got tense smiles and quick instructions on the space rules. "Nathan, you came," Karen exclaimed when she finally spotted me, her tone mixing surprise with a hint of irritation. It was clear my presence wasn't on her agenda. "You look especially sharp tonight." I opted for a dark gray suit, a professional choice that contrasted with the chic resort dress code she had established. "I wouldn't miss this opportunity for anything, Karen. Impressive event." "Thank you, dear." We raised nearly $5,000 in entry fees. After covering the party costs, we've got enough to start the community maintenance fund. "Fascinating," I replied, watching the guests circulate around my space as if it had always belonged to them. "And how much are you pocketing as an administrative fee?" Her smile froze for a moment. "Pardon?" "For organizing all of this. It must have taken some work." "Oh, I do it for the community," she answered, regaining her composure. "As president of the board, I consider it my responsibility." I nodded, feigning admiration. "Very noble of you." Karen squeezed my arm as if we were old friends. "Let me introduce you to a few people you really should know." The subtext was clear. People who could be useful to her, for in her view, I clearly needed help thriving in that environment. As she led me around the event, I absorbed every detail. Karen's husband, a finance executive with a perpetually bored expression. The doctor couple who had recently bought the mansion on the corner. The widow of the developer who practically built half the neighborhood. Every introduction came with a subtle comment about my youth or my luck being there. "Nathan just moved into the Palms," Karen kept explaining. "So young to have achieved so much already, right? We all should encourage him." For 2 hours I played the role. The young guy grateful for the chance to mingle with Beverly Hills' elite. I accepted investment tips I already knew, decoration suggestions I didn't need, and networking advice that nearly made me laugh. All the while, the discreet cameras I'd installed continued recording every moment, every interaction, every property violation. As the night wore on and the drinks flowed freely, Karen's social mask began to crack. By the pool area, where a small group had gathered, I heard her voice a tad too loud. Honestly, it was a miracle when we discovered this space. The previous owner never used it properly. She gestured grandly toward my leisure area. "And the new owner is..." She dropped her voice, but not enough. "Well, you know how these young executives are. Probably inherited money, or got incredibly lucky with Bitcoin." A discreet laugh rippled through the group. I took a sip of my non-alcoholic drink, keeping a neutral expression as I moved closer. "The space was practically abandoned," she continued. "I had to step in for the sake of the community. Everyone deserves to enjoy a space like this, not just someone who barely uses it." "The deed says otherwise," I commented softly, cutting into the conversation. The group fell silent, champagne flutes frozen mid-air. Karen turned, her smile wavering for a moment before she composed herself. "Nathan, we were just saying how generous you were to share this wonderful space." "Interesting. I heard something about stepping in for the community and an abandoned space," I replied, keeping my tone light yet firm. An older gentleman, whom I recognized as a retired judge, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Others started to find reasons to step away. Karen, however, remained steadfast. "I'm just explaining how this collaboration benefits all of us, including you," she said, lowering her voice. "You weren't even using this space regularly. We transformed something underused into a community meeting point. You should be grateful for the added value." "Value added," I repeated slowly. "Do you really think you're adding value to my property by unilaterally deciding it's no longer mine?" Quite an interesting legal perspective. The retired judge, who still hadn't managed to break free from the conversation, coughed nervously. Karen narrowed her eyes, letting part of her friendly facade slip. "Look, I know you're new here, and maybe don't get how things work in communities like the Palms. There are certain expectations. Contributions for the common good. I'd assume those contributions normally involve consent, I observed. Sometimes a little push is necessary to kickstart something beneficial, she replied, smiling at the few guests still nearby. Isn't that right, folks? Remember when you opposed the tennis club renewal? Now everybody loves it. A few murmurs of agreement were heard, albeit notably less enthusiastically than she'd hoped. The difference, I continued calmly, is that the tennis club belonged to the association. This area is my private property, legally bought and registered. Karen let out a forced laugh, as if I'd told an especially naive joke. Nathan, dear, in Beverly Hills, certain resources just make more sense when they're shared. It's like having a pet elephant in your backyard. Technically it might be yours, but it's just not logical not to let the local zoo take care of it properly. Fascinating analogy, I replied. Although I doubt the California Bar Association would agree with your legal reasoning. For the first time, I saw a genuine flicker of uncertainty in Karen's eyes. Quickly masked, but unmistakable. When the clock struck 10:30 p.m., I decided it was time for the grand finale. The party was at its peak, with around 60 people scattered across my property. Karen had just climbed the steps by the pool area, holding up her champagne glass for a toast. "Attention, dear friends and neighbors," she announced, her voice a bit tipsy, yet commanding authority. "I'd like to thank you all for contributing to our new community maintenance fund. Thanks to your generosity, we'll ensure this marvelous space stays impeccable for us to enjoy for many summers to come." Polite applause followed. I noticed some confused looks among the residents less close to Karen, clearly processing the idea that they'd paid to use a space that was supposedly already communal. "And a special thanks," she continued, vaguely gesturing in my direction, "to our newest neighbor for cooperating with our shared vision." That was my cue. I calmly walked up to her side, smiling at the small crowd. Karen looked momentarily rattled by my approach, but maintained her fixed smile. "Actually," I said in a clear, well-practiced voice honed in countless official hearings, "I'd like to make an announcement as well." Karen tried to regain control. "Of course, after we can... First of all, thank you all for coming to my property tonight," I began, noticing the growing discomfort in the eyes of some guests. "I believe there's been some confusion about the nature of this leisure area, so allow me to clarify. This space, including the pool, outdoor cinema, and gourmet area, is legally registered private property in my name." Absolute silence fell over the party. Karen opened her mouth to interrupt, but I raised my hand politely. "I'm not finished, Karen. As I was saying, this property legally belongs to me. Allowing tonight's event to take place was a calculated decision on my part." I pulled my official badge from the inside pocket of my blazer. "My name is Nathan Sullivan, and I'm a senior internal affairs officer. Over the past 3 weeks, I have systematically documented multiple property violations, the unauthorized distribution of access keys, fraudulent fee charges, and attempts to take control of private property." Karen's face visibly paled, her champagne glass trembling slightly in her hand. Around the area, guests began to shift uncomfortably, some discreetly checking their purses and jackets. "To clarify for everyone here," I continued, "there is no such thing as a community area here. There never was. Ms. Thompson took it upon herself to redesignate my property without my consent and, more worryingly, charged more than $5,000 tonight for access to property that is not hers." A murmuring buzz went through the crowd. I noticed several guests exchanging horrified looks, with some whispering furiously among themselves. Karen's husband, who had stayed on the periphery throughout the evening, suddenly appeared by her side, murmuring something urgently into her ear. "This is outrageous," Karen finally managed, her voice notably less confident. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding. I never claimed that this space belonged to me personally. I have recordings indicating otherwise," I replied calmly, "as well as bank transfer records, copies of the official invitations you distributed, and that community use contract you drafted yourself, establishing rules for property that isn't yours." Karen looked frantically around, searching for allies among the guests. She mostly found faces filled with shock and embarrassment. "This is a private matter that we can resolve civilly," she attempted, forcing a smile. "There's no need to make a spectacle of it." "I couldn't agree more," I replied. "That's why I'm giving everyone here the opportunity to leave now with the understanding that they were inadvertently caught up in an irregular situation. The party is officially over." As if a spell had been broken, the crowd started dispersing quickly. People hurriedly slung their bags over their shoulders, mumbled apologies, and avoided eye contact as they headed for the exit. In a matter of minutes, only a small group remained, Karen and her husband. a few visibly upset board members, and 2 of the condo security officers I had discreetly alerted earlier. "This is ridiculous," Karen tried again, her voice now trembling. "I was only trying to integrate underused amenities for the benefit of the community. Any fees collected were purely to cover the party costs. There was no malice." "I understand," I replied in a professional tone. "However, the law does not recognize integrating underused amenities as a justification for appropriating private property. As for the fee contributions, I'd be very interested to see a transparent accounting of those funds." One of the board members, a middle-aged woman I recognized as a corporate lawyer, stepped forward. "Karen, I think we should continue this discussion at a formal board meeting. There are clearly significant legal issues we need to address properly." The collapse of Karen's authority was almost palpable in the air. Her social empire, built on presumptions and intimidation, was crumbling right before her eyes. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like to get access to more stories like this. The next morning, the condominium was eerily silent. I sipped my coffee on the porch while watching workers discreetly take down the last remnants of the party. Karen had hired a cleaning crew, perhaps her only genuine act of consideration throughout this whole saga. My phone buzzed with messages from neighbors I barely knew. Apologies, expressions of shock, reassurances that they had no idea about the full story. Beverly Hills' gossip machine was working at full speed. Around noon, a polite knock on the door announced the visit of Dr. Sophia Chen, the condo board's vice president. Unlike Karen, Sophia had always kept a respectful distance from my property. "Mr. Sullivan," she began formally as I invited her in. "On behalf of the board, I'd like to express our deep embarrassment over the incident. We held an emergency meeting this morning." "I imagine it was interesting," I commented, offering her a cup of coffee, which she politely declined. "Karen Thompson has been removed from the presidency, effective immediately," she informed me. "The board is committed to conducting a full audit of the finances related to this incident. Any funds that were improperly collected will be refunded to the residents along with our sincere apologies." I nodded in acknowledgement. "And Karen?" Sophia adjusted her glasses nervously. "She and her husband left this morning for their summer home in Napa, indefinitely. Her law firm issued a statement saying she'll be taking personal leave. Understandable." "Mr. Sullivan," Sophia continued, clearly uncomfortable, "we understand that you have legal grounds to file formal complaints against Karen and possibly against the condo association. We'd like to discuss potential resolutions that might avoid," she hesitated, "unnecessary legal proceedings." The irony wasn't lost on me. Just 24 hours before, I was the young intruder who needed to learn how things work at the Palms. Now, the entire community was tiptoeing around me. "Dr. Chen, I'm not interested in suing the association," I replied honestly. "My goal was never to create a prolonged conflict, just to set clear boundaries." Relief was evident on her face. "That's very generous of you. As for Karen," I continued, "I don't intend to press criminal charges either, provided that all unauthorized keys are returned and the money collected is donated in full to community affordable housing programs in downtown Los Angeles." Sophia blinked, surprised by my specific condition. "Affordable housing? Seems fitting. People should appreciate the value of a home, regardless of their financial means." She slowly nodded, processing the irony. "I'll pass your proposal along to the board and Karen's lawyers. I'm sure everyone would prefer that resolution over more complicated alternatives." After she left, I returned to my lounge chair by the pool, the same one I'd been sitting in when all of this began. The water shimmered under the relentless Beverly Hills sun, and the silence was broken only by the gentle burbling of the spa jets. My phone buzzed with a message from Rodriguez. "So, how did the Karen saga end?" I typed a simple reply. "Just like any successful investigation, with irrefutable evidence and appropriate consequences." I set my phone aside and closed my eyes, soaking in the warmth of the sun. In my line of work hunting misconduct, I rarely got to see immediate, satisfying consequences. Most cases dragged on for months or years in bureaucratic and legal limbo. This whole affair, though personal, reminded me why I chose this profession. It wasn't about punishment, but about restoring balance and justice, even in the most privileged corners of Los Angeles. At the next condo meeting, I'd show up as any other owner, neither a victim nor an authority, just a resident interested in the community's well-being. And if anyone questioned my unconventional methods with Karen, I'd simply remind them that sometimes the most effective justice is the one that lets people hang themselves with their own ropes of arrogance. Meanwhile, my leisure area would remain exactly as it's always been, mine. With one crucial difference: now it was protected not only by locks and security systems, but by the powerful shield of newly earned respect from a community that had learned the hard way that appearances and assumptions don't replace the basic limits of law and decency. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like to get access to more stories like this.